Hi guys, it's me, Sakhir HD, and welcome tonight to this 2021 Bahrain Grand Prix race review after yesterday's, of course, Bahrain Grand Prix. Hopefully you guys will recover from what was definitely a very interesting, exciting end, especially to that Grand Prix. And what we're going to be doing tonight, or tonight my time, of course, as it's going to be sundown in probably about an hour here in the UK, or in my part of the UK. What I'm going to be doing is going through all the teams and talking about how they did, also analysing some incidents that happened, getting into some data as well. Also, the main thing we are going to be covering is, of course, Hamilton versus Verstappen, Verstappen's illegal overtake, also the whole track limits controversy that I have seen has been going on in the past 24 hours. So we will be getting into that very deeply as well. But again, we'll get through all the teams and, of course, update you with the championship standings. Hopefully you guys are doing well. And yeah, hopefully you will, in the chat and in the comment section after this stream is finished, hopefully give your thoughts on all the teams, drivers, incidents, everything that happened in the Bahrain Grand Prix. But if you are unsure or you don't know what the official results of the Bahrain Grand Prix were, you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, you've got Lewis Hamilton first, of course, winning the Grand Prix. Max Verstappen second, Bottas third. And then the rest of the top 10, Norris, Perez, Leclerc, Ricciardo, Sainz, Tsunoda, and Stroll. By the way, we didn't cover it at the end of the race watch-along, but Tsunoda did pass Lance Stroll, I think, on the final lap. Again, didn't manage to cover that because we were concentrating on Verstappen versus Hamilton, but there you go. And then not finishing the points, but finishing the Grand Prix, Raikkonen, Giovinazzi, Ocon, Russell, Vettel, and Mick Schumacher. And then retiring Gasly, Latifi, Alonso, Mazepin. And if you want to see the timings, you can see here the gaps. So, of course, Lewis Hamilton only winning by 3/4 of a second. That's exactly how he wanted. And Bottas, of course, miles behind. Firstly, down to his slow pit stop, and then of course he pitted for a fastest lap point, which he did get. And then the midfield, I thought pace-wise was actually pretty much improved across the board compared to, if you compare the midfield teams to what Mercedes and Red Bull's pace was like. I thought it was definitely improved, especially from Ferrari. But yeah, those were the official results of the Grand Prix. And now let's get into the biggest talking point from the Bahrain Grand Prix. And that is, of course, Lewis Hamilton's win over Max Verstappen and the battle that they had. But how did Lewis Hamilton beat Max Verstappen? Well, let's get into it. So, at the start of the Grand Prix, I'll actually move on from this picture quickly. At the start of the Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton was, got away nicely enough in second place, was about 2 seconds behind consistently Max Verstappen before we got to the first round of pit stops. So Hamilton was still close enough to really challenge and possibly later on hurt Max Verstappen in terms of getting the race win. Then, on, I believe, lap 13... Lewis Hamilton pitted for a set of hard compound tyres, and that was a great decision made by Mercedes because they immediately put Red Bull under pressure on the strategy, whether Red Bull, putting pressure on Red Bull to either pit a lap later and obviously risk it being very close between Max and Lewis on track, or put pressure on Red Bull to possibly go, say, a different way on strategy compared to what Mercedes were doing. Of course, in the Grand Prix, Mercedes started with the mediums, just like Max Verstappen did. And Mercedes did a medium, hard strategy. And Red Bull, with Max Verstappen, did a medium, then went on to the medium again, and then ended the race, of course, on the hard compound of tyre. So once he made that pit stop, Max Verstappen was, of course, under a lot of pressure. And the lap he did, I think the lap of or after Lewis Hamilton pitted wasn't great. But if Red Bull had pitted Max Verstappen the lap after, I think Max Verstappen would have just about held on to the lead, and I think Max Verstappen wins the Grand Prix. That, I would say, is probably... I mean, of course, Max Verstappen at the end could have won the race if he passed Lewis Hamilton without going off track, of course, but the best chance of Red Bull winning the Grand Prix after Lewis Hamilton had made that pit stop was to respond straight away with a pit stop. Red Bull, though, just... I guess the only way you could say it is they were kind of afraid to go toe-to-toe with Mercedes because, again, to most teams, it'd be pretty obvious, you know, when Hamilton pitted to respond a lap later and to cover that off as best you can. But it almost seemed as though Red Bull were adamant that they had to go a different way to what Mercedes were doing, which is why Red Bull, I think, were... You know, they went for that more aggressive strategy in the second stint by going on the medium compound, but responded 4 or 5 laps later to Lewis Hamilton's pit stop, when, again, what they should have done is, again, go toe-to-toe on the strategy side with Mercedes, pit a lap later, and even if Max was passed by Lewis, he would straight away be within DRS, so if he did have the much quicker car, then he should have got past him, you know, say 5 laps at most later, and then would have been back into the lead and possibly could have built up a gap again with 1 lap, fresher tyres, and a quicker car, because Red Bull did have, with Max Verstappen at least, the quicker car, just about, compared to Mercedes. So, that really, and at the time of the race watch along, me and Nib really did question why Red Bull didn't pit. Because it just seemed so obvious that you know, would be the right thing to do. But again, they just didn't do it and went a different route. And that different route almost worked. But even if it did work, they gave themselves more hard work than they really had to. It didn't have to be that hard to win the Grand Prix. It could have been, as I said, just pitting a lap later and covering him off just about, and just doing it that way, which is normally the way you do it when it's close at the front of the grid. And I think this data here between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton really proves that he had to pit a lap later after Lewis Hamilton, because you can see with Hamilton's times, which are on the far right of these 3 columns, the far left one, of course, for the 2 columns there for Ocon, the 2 columns in the middle for Verstappen, and the 2 ones on the right are for Hamilton. You can see Lewis Hamilton on lap 12 does a 1:36.5, which is that's around about what Max Verstappen was doing at the time, a mid 1:36. Then Lewis Hamilton pits, and then once he does his first proper flying lap, which is recorded on lap 15, he does a 1:34.0, which is 2.5 seconds quicker than he was going right before his pit stop. I mean, we all know the undercut in Bahrain is so powerful. We know this already, but this is just, you know, massive confirmation of that. But if you look at that, so 34.0 on lap 15, Max Verstappen did a 1:36.9. So he was almost 3 seconds slower on that lap alone. Now, maybe if Max, you know, pits a lap later, maybe Lewis does get into the lead. But still, Max, as I said a moment ago, would have been still probably within DRS and would have been able to repass Lewis Hamilton a lot sooner, or at least attempt to pass Lewis Hamilton a lot sooner than he did in reality, which was at the end of the Grand Prix, of course. Because, you know, if Hamilton gains that much time then, and then, you know, Max Verstappen was out, I think, for another 2 laps, you're losing just way too much time. And again, making it just way, way too hard for yourself when it doesn't have to be so difficult. It really did not have to be so difficult. Mercedes, I've got to say, on the strategy, got it right, because as you can see, they went onto the hard tyre and then pitted about 15 laps later to cover off an undercut from Max Verstappen, which again proved to be the right decision, because as you can see, after Lewis Hamilton pitted, for the second time, it says 28 and then P for Lewis Hamilton's couple columns there. You can see at the very bottom. Hamilton, for the next few laps, was lapping, say, late 34s, early 1 minute 35s, when Max Verstappen was lapping consistently, say, 5 to 7 tenths of a second slower during that run until Max Verstappen pitted about 11 laps after Lewis Hamilton's final stop on lap 28. So Mercedes strategically got it so well. Red Bull, again, just failed to go toe-to-toe with Mercedes when I think that's really the best way they could have gone in the Grand Prix. But Max Verstappen, of course, did still have a chance to pass Hamilton on track and win the Grand Prix, despite Mercedes really acing the strategy there. Because as you can see here, right to the end of the Grand Prix, and it was so exciting, Max Verstappen closed the gap after Lewis Hamilton made a mistake as well at turn 10. That really allowed Max Verstappen to get within the slipstream, get DRS, and really put on a strong fight for the race win. But of course, once we got to turn 4, Max Verstappen attempted to go around the outside, and on the exit, where really the overtake at that corner is completed, most people will keep it on the track. But because Max Verstappen, if you go back and watch the onboard replay of Max Verstappen, in the mid part of that overtake, or attempted overtake, Max Verstappen gets some oversteer and does go, as you can clearly see here, way off the track in overtaking Lewis Hamilton. So no doubt Max Verstappen illegally overtook Lewis Hamilton. There is no doubt about it. And I think, let me see if I've got another picture. This one doesn't show it as well, but you can still clearly see, again, Max Verstappen off the track. And again, here, Max Verstappen off the track. And rightfully so, he let Lewis Hamilton back through. Was a shame he couldn't have another go, but he just lost all of the momentum he had, which was a shame. But at the end of the day, I think Red Bull really did lose this Grand Prix more so than Mercedes won it. I mean, Mercedes did everything they could on, again, strategy, and Lewis Hamilton drove very well. No doubt about that. But Red Bull didn't quite, didn't pit when they should have. And Max Verstappen, at that particular moment, very important moment, just failed to get it done cleanly and legally. So I think Red Bull definitely lost this Grand Prix more so again the Mercedes actually won the Grand Prix. But there was controversy over Lewis Hamilton and his, let's say, his track extending at turn 4, on the exit of turn 4, during the Grand Prix when he was just, lapping during the Grand Prix. Now, there was a video that I was sent by Nib of Hamilton going off at that particular corner. I think, was it 29 times? And of course, that's not good. But there are reasons why Lewis Hamilton factually did not break the rules and did not deserve a penalty. Now, I will add, I do not agree with the FIA's clarification or rules on this for the Grand Prix that they came up with. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying, objectively speaking, Lewis Hamilton did not break the rules and should not have been penalised when Max Verstappen, of course, as I'll show again, overtook Hamilton off the track. So, again, I don't know if I said this a moment ago, but Lewis Hamilton, yes, he went off that many times, but also plenty of other drivers did, plenty of times. So he wasn't the only one. So he would have had to have penalised a lot of drivers if, if you were going to police it that hard. But if you look at the actual rules, again, Lewis Hamilton is, again, not really to blame here, because I'll show you this. So on the 26th of March, this article appeared on Race Fans, and I actually read this before the Grand Prix because I thought it was a bit interesting. But this is the FIA race director, Michael Massey, and what he did was he came up with different track limit rules for qualifying and the Grand Prix itself for the race in Bahrain. So, 26th of March was, I think, Friday. So the drivers were told about these different track limit rules before even qualifying started. So the drivers, and I know I've heard a couple complain, I think Hamilton and Verstappen kind of complained about the confusing track limit rules, but they were told, so they can't just sit there and say, oh, well, we didn't know what was going on. You were told. That's, that is a fact. And let me get into the meat of the article and reveal basically what exonerates Lewis Hamilton on this, should he have got a penalty for track extending 29 times. So, let me read this. It says, however, race director Michael Massey issued revised guidance for drivers ahead of second practice, including new instructions regarding turn 4. It now specifies different instructions for practice, which includes qualifying practice, basically means qualifying, and the race. For practice and qualifying, the rules state a lap time achieved during any practice session or qualifying session by leaving the track and cutting behind the red and white curb on the exit of turn 4 will result in that lap time being invalidated by the stewards. Now, that was the case because in practice, Valtteri Bottas, I remember, had plenty of lap times invalidated for doing that. Perez had a time in Q2 invalidated, so did Daniel Ricciardo. That's why if you go back and watch my watch along for qualifying, Ricciardo and Perez were down in the drop zone with no lap time set until the end of the session because their first times were invalidated, rightfully so. But it says, however, during the race, drivers have been told, quote, the track limits at the exit of turn 4 will not be monitored with regard to setting a lap time, as the defining limits are the artificial grass and the gravel trap in that location. But then it goes on to say, quote, in all cases, during the race, drivers are reminded of the provisions of Article 27.3 of the Sport and Regulations. This rule states drivers must make every reasonable effort to use the track at all times and may not leave the track without a justifiable reason. Now, I do agree, I think Christian Horner said it, and I do agree to a certain extent and partly that part right there, the whole must make a reasonable effort and may not leave the track without a justifiable reason. When above it, it says lap times won't be monitored for track limit violations at turn 4. That is a grey area, for sure. But again, the third small, paragraph there, I think basically, again, exonerates Lewis Hamilton. The track limits at the exit of turn 4 were not going to be monitored with regard to setting a lap time, as the defining limits, according to them, are the artificial grass and the gravel trap in that location. Now, I would have liked the track limits there to be enforced like it was in qualifying. So I'm not saying I agree with or the way they were enforcing the rules. I'm not saying I agree, but again, objectively, Lewis Hamilton did nothing wrong because they weren't going to penalise him for what he did. Now, they did give him a warning, I think after the 28th or 29th time he did it. And that's really where Michael Massey and the stewards fucked up, because that is what caused the controversy and the possibility of people saying that they were changing the track limit rules during the race, when if they had not given him a warning and just left it as it is, then they could have just pointed to this and say, well, the rule stated that Lewis Hamilton did nothing wrong and no one did. So, again, Lewis Hamilton factually did nothing wrong. I don't agree with the way the stewards and the FIA in general for this Grand Prix enforce the rules. Please don't think I'm agreeing with that. But again, factually, he did nothing wrong. And then you had, Christian Horner saying we need a consistent situation, as he was frustrated by grey area on track limits. But I've got to say, I think there has been some saltiness from certain people in regards to Lewis Hamilton's race win, not in terms of fans, but more so people within the sport, driver or team, members of the upper parts of a team. Because at the end of the day, if I go back to that article, Michael Massey, it says at the very top, issued revised guidance for the drivers ahead of second practice. So the drivers knew about this. They knew about this. They can't go and say, we didn't know that, that was the rule. No, you did, because you were told. So, again, they can't claim that when it comes to this issue. Again, I don't agree with the way they enforce the rules, but that is the way it is, I'm afraid. And of course, Horner was disappointed by that. But yeah, Lewis Hamilton versus Max Verstappen, what a great battle it was. And definitely, I am keen, as everyone else is, to see more from these two on track like this, wheel to wheel, racing their hearts out for the race win and hopefully for the World Championship as well. But I also just want to quickly, before I come to you guys in the chat, just want to quickly go on to the second driver. So Valtteri Bottas, we don't really need to talk about him. I think we already know what the issues he had. A very slow pit stop. That's why he couldn't really feature with Verstappen and Hamilton for the race win. I think he was always going to finish in third place anyway, so I don't think it's, his race wasn't exactly headline making. But still, good first weekend for Valtteri considering the pace of the car and all of that. For Sergio Perez, though, it was definitely a topsy-turvy Grand Prix, breaking down on the formation lap, coming into the pit, starting at the end of the pit lane after doing a Control-Alt-Delete on his steering wheel. Then he got underway, and then I thought had a very good Grand Prix to finish in fifth. And his pace, considering he was coming through the field a lot, if you look at the gap he finished off of the leaders, he didn't do that bad. He did pretty well, I thought. I guess the only thing he'll maybe be disappointed by is that he couldn't get through the field quicker, so he could maybe close the gap to Lando Norris. But then again, Lando Norris did drive very well. But yeah, I thought Sergio Perez, very good Grand Prix. And as long as Perez can, at Imola, start in the top 10, and there not be any issues for him, such as, he, again, gets knocked out in Q2 because he's trying to qualify into the top 10 on a harder compound tyre, or there's no reliability issues, I think Sergio Perez at Imola will be definitely featuring a lot more stronger at that particular Grand Prix weekend. And hopefully he does, because his first weekend with the Red Bull team wasn't exactly the smoothest, was it? But before we get into the rest of the teams, so there you go, there is Mercedes and Red Bull for you. Let me know now, guys, in the live chat, what do you think of the whole Hamilton-Verstappen battle? How Hamilton won that battle, because of course Mercedes got it right on strategy and Max Verstappen's team Red Bull did not. And also, what did you think about the whole controversy at the end with track limits and the track limits enforcing by the FIA? Let me know in the chat right now before we go on next to McLaren versus Ferrari. Let me have a quick look at the chat to see what you guys have to say. By the way, hello to everyone who's watching. Great to see you all here after the Grand Prix. Hello to Iceman, Rooksfoot, Count Blah, Francisco, just everyone in the chat. Connor Chapman as well. Let me have a quick read before we get into that midfield battle. The Iceman says this season could all come down to track position and strategy because Mercedes and Red Bull are pretty even and Lewis and Max are simply amazing drivers. I think I said it in the build-up to the Grand Prix that whoever wins the Bahrain Grand Prix, it will come down to those fine margins, such as the start, any safety car restarts, the pit stops, stuff like that. And it did come down, again, to the fine margins of pit stops and Max passing Hamilton but illegally off the circuit. And at the end of the day, World Championship battles, proper ones that go down to, the final Grand Prix, they are decided by those fine margins. So, I mean, Max, of course, will be disappointed not to win the Grand Prix, but he shouldn't think, oh, well, you know, we missed a big chance here, because he could easily strike back in Imola, no doubt about it. I expect Red Bull to be, with Verstappen, definitely quick enough to challenge for victory. But I do think at Imola, Mercedes will be a bit stronger as they learn more about their car, which was a bit all over the place in testing. Let me look at some more comments quick. Infinite says, I'll not be surprised if Mercedes are quicker in Imola because Merc can do a lot in 3 weeks. They have all that race data and qualifying data and know where to improve on. I think if I was to say now who I think would get pole position in Imola, I think I'd go for Lewis Hamilton, because as kind of you said, I think Mercedes will make an improvement on their car. Red Bull will be very strong as well, but I just think Mercedes, really as the season goes on, I don't see Mercedes not improving. I just think they'll improve as the season goes on, which is why I still think Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes are clear favourites to win the championship, because I don't see them, in terms of their development, stalling really during the season unless they build a dominant gap and then concentrate everything on 2022. Right, let me see if there's any other ones here. Francisco says, the fact that Hamilton left the track 29 times at turn 4 leaves me very upset with the rules. You should get 2 warnings and a penalty at the 3rd infringement. To be honest, I agree with you. But again, if you're looking at the actual rules and whether Hamilton should have been, by the rules we are going on, penalised, he shouldn't have been. But if I designed the rules, then yeah, he would have been penalised. But then again, if he knew he would get a penalty if he did it 3 times, would Lewis Hamilton have done it 29 times? I don't think he would. So it's kind of that whole time travel thing, isn't it? If you change one thing, it doesn't just, life doesn't just continue on as normal. It changes everything else around it. So if you were to make the rules different on track limits for the race before the Grand Prix even took place and let the drivers know of that, then again, Hamilton wouldn't have done that and may not have gained as much time as he did. Who knows? Who knows? Let me see if there's any other ones here, good ones here. Hello, by the way, to Mike in the chat. Connor Chapman says, this guy right back at it again. Man, I miss Charlie. Yes, you changed rules for specific layouts, but they've changed rules at the same venue. That I do disagree with that, but I would have been a lot more angry if they had done that, in between qualifying and the race, which I think has happened before. Can't remember when, but at least they did it, during Friday, because if they had done it after, qualifying and said, oh, by the way, track limits at turn 4, forget about it, do what you want, yeah, then that would have been pretty poor. But at least they came up with that before we got losing our minds over this. Let me see if there's 2 or 3 more good ones if I can. Track limits at Imola were a joke last year, so expect more controversy there, says the Iceman. Oh yeah, at what's that corner called? It's the uphill left-hand fast one. Can't remember what it's called again. But yeah, that was a complete joke for sure. Yeah, hopefully they're a bit better on that, because there were drivers who were, I guess, extending, and I do that with quotation fingers. Yeah, I hope they're not as strict on that, because there were drivers who were doing it, or getting penalties, but they were like slightly over the white line. But the reason they were slightly over the white line is because when you get on the curb curbs in Formula 1 or just in racing in general tend to pull you more towards the curb itself. So sometimes that is why drivers will briefly go over the white lines if they get too stuck on a curb. So I hope they're not so strict on that. But anyway, I think it is time we get on to the next topic. So let's get on to McLaren versus Ferrari. Now, McLaren, I thought, had an overall good Grand Prix. Lando Norris, the man on screen, what a Grand Prix from him. Dominantly winning the midfield battle. And if you look at his performance compared to Daniel Ricciardo, his teammate, his new teammate, I know Daniel, it was his first race in that, but let's remember, Ricciardo outqualified Norris. So for Norris to get ahead the way he did, and the overtake he put on Ricciardo was so great, and then the one he did on Leclerc as well to get up there as well. Another great overtake by Lando, something he is clearly very good at, as we've seen in the past. For him to do that, and then to just run away at the front of the midfield pack, it was such a phenomenal drive from Lando Norris. So very happy to see him replicating his great performance at the Bahrain Grand Prix from last year as well. Because you remember from the 2020 Bahrain Grand Prix, he finished P4 there as well. So very good drive by Lando, and hopefully keeps this form up into the next Grand Prix at Imola. For Daniel Ricciardo, though, it was a bit of a difficult Grand Prix for him. After he got passed by Norris, he then, after Norris then passed Charles Leclerc, Ricciardo got held up behind Charles Leclerc. Then the pit stops happened, and because McLaren, well, they couldn't really respond any quicker with Ricciardo at the first round of pit stops, because I think the lap before Lando Norris had pitted for McLaren. But because Ricciardo pitted a lap after Charles Leclerc, who then gained so much time, Ricciardo then lost time to him. I think then he lost position to Fernando Alonso briefly and got stuck in a bit of traffic. And in terms of that battle between Daniel Ricciardo and Charles Leclerc, that's what really cost Daniel, is having to pit a lap or two later at the pit stops. That cost him time. Then the traffic cost him time. And then towards the end of the Grand Prix, his tyres did go away very quickly, and was lucky that there wasn't another lap, because Carlos Sainz, who pitted for his final pit stop a lot later than Daniel, probably could have passed him with another lap or two. So, yeah, Daniel lucky to finish in P7. But I think Daniel's had a good weekend still. I mean, 7th place. He's still getting used to the team and the car. Next Grand Prix, of course, is Imola, where he got a podium, and he was very good there at the track in the Grand Prix there we did last year. So I expect Daniel Ricciardo to be very good there and to be in that top 6-7 on the grid. But I think the race he'll be a bit miffed with, because again, he did out-qualify Lando Norris, so he'll be a bit disappointed with that. But with Ferrari, gotta say, most impressive team out of anyone, it's got to be them. Because in qualifying, they, I think, had probably the 3rd best car. Maybe at worst, the 4th best car. And then in the Grand Prix, I'll be honest, with Leclerc starting 4th and Sainz in 8th, and they were both starting the race on the softest compound, because of the last couple of years, and Ferrari have had very poor race pace, especially when they do start on the softest compound, I will admit, I thought Ferrari were going to struggle. And once Lando Norris passed him early on, and then Daniel Ricciardo was sizing up a move, I thought, yep, here we go. That Ferrari hasn't got any pace. But then after the first pit stops, the Ferrari pace-wise was just consistently good. I mean, it wasn't as good as the McLaren, I don't think, but it was just, again, consistently good. Wasn't all over the place. The drivers were clearly happy enough with it for a decent result of 6th and 8th compared to what they were like at the 2020 Bahrain Grand Prix. So, yeah, I think Ferrari, very impressive. I mean, they've still got a massive ways to go to get back to where they want to be. They were still about, on average, a second a lap slower than the leaders, and that's still obviously for them not good enough. But, last year, they were 1.5 to 2 seconds a lap off the leaders. So, again, big improvement, and that is very good to see. And for Carlos Sainz, who we'll get on to now, his strategy of pitting a lot later, it did work in terms of getting past Stroll and that. Maybe, though, if he pitted a lap or two sooner for his last pit stop, maybe then he could have actually passed Ricciardo. Because, of course, when Sainz was left out there right before his second pit stop, Ricciardo would have been gaining all the time on him. So, again, in hindsight, maybe a lap or two earlier on the pit stop there for Carlos Sainz. But overall, I don't think Ferrari can really complain. They didn't really make any mistakes. Pit stops went fine. Strategy was fine. Pace was fine. First Grand Prix in a while where Ferrari actually did what they was supposed to or expected to do, which is, massively surprising. And, of course, led to, at times, Ferrari, as you can see with this picture, racing McLaren. But also, I just want to show this. This is the fastest laps from the Grand Prix. And this does illustrate Ferrari's improvement because obviously last year at these types of races and these types of track layouts, Ferrari, compared to teams like McLaren, would be miles behind because of the lack of grip in the race and the horrible straight line speed. But as you can see here, I mean, there, Lando Norris, quicker than Carlos Sainz by about 1/10 of a second. Carlos Sainz, when he set his quickest lap, had much fresher tyres and probably lower fuel by quite a bit, but still equalish on lap time there. But, you know, Daniel Ricciardo and Charles Leclerc there, 10th and 11th, their best laps were set around the same time. And yeah, there's only, half a tenth in it. So you can just clearly see, again, with the data proving it, that Ferrari have made massive improvements. Also, though, very impressive is the Williams of Russell and also AlphaTauri, even though they didn't get quite the race result they were hoping for. They're quite impressive on the lap times as well. But you can clearly see, without a doubt, Ferrari, and the evidence shows that they have made quite a sizable jump up, which we were hoping for. I'd say it's mostly expected that they did do this, but it is good to see because we do need Ferrari going in the right direction, not the wrong direction. And hopefully, and I think at Imola, Ferrari, if they can, continue improving, possibly in this 3-week break to the next Grand Prix, I don't see why Ferrari can't be, 4th, 5th, 6th on the grid again. Don't see why they can't, because they do have the car that's a lot more capable of that now. And of course, I have two drivers who are easily capable of dragging performance out of the car that simply isn't there, especially this man on screen, Charles Leclerc. But guys, let me know in the chat, what did you think of this battle and the drivers? And when it comes to Ferrari, how impressed were you with the pace, again, compared to last year? Of course, we still want Ferrari to, close the gap a lot more to the front two than it currently is. And they're still quite a bit off pace-wise. Again, they were about a second a lap off during the course of the Grand Prix. So, yeah, let me know in the chat. Were you surprised? Are you happy with this? Just, again, let me know in the chat what you thought of Ferrari's performance. And then after that, I think, let me just check what we're going on to next. I think it's AlphaTauri, it is. So, yeah, we'll be getting into that in a moment. Let me just see what you guys think. Let me just look. Ferrari better, but still far off. Ben says, I think Ferrari will be top 4 and AlphaTauri will be P5. I think definitely for now, we definitely have a top 5 in the field. Maybe not in this order, but these 5 teams are in that top 5 team bracket pace-wise, and it's Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren, Ferrari, AlphaTauri. Those are the best 5 teams right now in Formula 1 in terms of speed. Again, though, not necessarily in that order, because I thought Red Bull were quicker than Mercedes just about over the course of the weekend. Even though I thought Mercedes' race pace, I will say another thing that I forgot to say. I thought Mercedes' race pace was very strong and very ominous. So look out for that at the next Grand Prix, because I thought their race pace was very strong. And then probably the best midfield team to be honest, in Bahrain, I thought it was AlphaTauri. I thought they had the best car, but they couldn't show it because Yuki Tsunoda started low down and Pierre Gasly had his problem, which we'll get onto in a minute, is contact with Daniel Ricciardo. I thought, again, AlphaTauri had the best car, but didn't quite capitalise on that. And then I'd probably say, yeah, McLaren, probably slightly quicker than Ferrari, with Ferrari 5th, but definitely, I think, going forward for the next race or two, I think these two teams, McLaren and Ferrari, will be very close on track, without a doubt. Infinite says, Ferrari and AlphaTauri are main rivals now. McLaren have way better race pace. McLaren definitely do have the better race pace, but it is still close enough where Ferrari can make a difference. NN says AlphaTauri might actually be third right now. They underperformed. They definitely did in terms of the results. Again, we go back to the lap times. You can see there, AlphaTauri 5th and 8th. So I think AlphaTauri did have the third quickest car in Bahrain, but again, didn't get the result that it deserved. They really deserved a result like McLaren got, 4th and 7th, but now already have catching up to do in the Constructors' Championship ahead of the next Grand Prix. Connor Chapman says, I believe Ferrari's improved pace is equally the improved power unit and not having the friction and lack of confidence from Vettel. I think definitely, having two cars that are definitely performing at similar levels, that definitely helps, because last year you had one car, it was Charles Leclerc looking aerodynamically, at some times it looked fine, and then Sebastian Vettel's car looked like it was undrivable basically all the time. So that does help, but I think Ferrari's improvement is definitely power unit a lot, because they've overtaken Renault, I think, in terms of power output, but also they've had a sizable aerodynamic improvement. So I'd say it's equally from both of those areas, which is, again, what we were hoping for and it's what we've got. Tim Huter says, I think Ferrari will be third in Imola because it suits their car. That's kind of the thinking I've got, because Imola, it definitely requires a lot more aerodynamic grip that you need than Bahrain. Bahrain is a power circuit, so McLaren were definitely looking good compared to Ferrari in the race if McLaren got within DRS of them, because again, the McLaren is much quicker in a straight line. But Imola, if Ferrari do have, again, like they had in Bahrain, very strong qualifying pace, at Imola it's very hard to overtake. So if they can get that, say, 5th and 7th, or even a third row lockout, then I think Ferrari can beat McLaren and everyone else in the midfield at Imola. Because again, it is so hard to overtake there. And I think even better for Ferrari is that after Imola, we then have Portimao and the Circuit de Catalunya as the next two tracks. And I think as the season goes on, probably until we get to Baku, as the season goes on, for the next 4 races, every track basically requires more aerodynamic grip, which is still, by the looks of it, Ferrari's biggest strong point. The power unit, again, massively improved, but I think the reason they were so quick in Bahrain was a bit more to do with grip than it was power, because again, if you look at the speed traps, they were not really able to match the Mercedes-powered cars, and definitely not the Honda-powered cars. But, yeah, I think what we're going to do is, like I said, we'll now move on to AlphaTauri, who, again, disappointed in terms of the result. Yuki Tsunoda, I thought, drove very well to get P9. Great move that he did on Fernando Alonso during the race. What a move that was, sending it down the inside and getting it done very cleanly. Did pass Lance Stroll at the very end of the Grand Prix. Again, something I missed. And I'm, sorry about that, but we were obviously concentrating on Hamilton versus Verstappen. So good first Grand Prix for Yuki Tsunoda. And next race being Imola, I don't see why he can't get a points finish again, because I think AlphaTauri will be definitely top 10 contenders. And hopefully they'll get both cars in the top 10 in qualifying, which of course would help Yuki Tsunoda's result a lot. But for Pierre Gasly, it was disappointing because he was looking, even though he lost a position, I think he had lost a couple positions to the two McLarens right before his contact. He was still looking good. He was still on the medium compound, and once we got to lap 10 or so, he really would have been easily passing those McLarens and even Charles Leclerc because of being on a much better compound and having the quicker car, and also the quicker car in a straight line. So Gasly really was on for something big, even though he didn't have the greatest of starts, but then of course had his contact with Daniel Ricciardo. I'm going to take you through it now. So here is the entry to, I think it's turn 5 and 6. So as you can see here, Daniel Ricciardo is clearly overtaken him and is past him. Now at this point, as a driver, you've got to be thinking, right, I'm not going to pass him. Just got to settle in behind him and just wait, maybe until we get to the pit straight again to get back into the groove, after a few corners, and then start to probably set up a move. But Pierre, because obviously it's the first lap, or not the first lap, but the first few laps, I think it was just a safety car restart or something like that, Pierre is wanting to get on with it. And at this point is where Pierre should be braking about the same as Daniel Ricciardo to follow him behind, because again, he's not going to overtake him. Going around the outside of this corner, I mean, you have to be around the outside and have your car kind of fully alongside before you even get into the braking phase to do that move. So at this point, you shouldn't even be thinking about that. But simply because he doesn't brake around the same time as Ricciardo and goes that bit later on the brakes, and because he's so close behind and will be affected by the dirty air, Pierre simply goes into his rear tyre there. And I will say, I am surprised Daniel Ricciardo did not get a puncture, because Gasly did hit him pretty hard on the rear. And of course, Gasly, as you can see there by the spark on the left hand side, broke his front wing. But it was simply, again, if you look back at the pictures, again, Ricciardo's clearly ahead. Gasly really just needs to settle in behind. And at this point even, but then just closes up massively in the braking phase and then hits the back of Ricciardo. So simply, it was Pierre Gasly just getting a bit too hot on the brakes, and the dirty air wouldn't have helped either. But yeah, disappointing for AlphaTauri, because they did have, I think, a very strong package. They should have been getting a very good points haul, but only 2 points, so that will be a massive shame for them. Next up, we'll go on to Aston Martin. Aston Martin's pace in the race was definitely a lot better than I thought it would. Sebastian Vettel has some good battles in there, of course, with Fernando Alonso. That was so great, that battle of him and Alonso. Great to see that. And those two back on track, racing each other very hard again. Lance Stroll, I thought, for the first half of the Grand Prix, I thought his pace was really good, and I thought he was driving, and really the whole race, I thought he did the best he could. And I thought qualifying as well, he did a very good job. So great weekend for Lance Stroll, because that Aston Martin car is definitely not as quick as, of course, the Mercedes, the Red Bull, the McLaren, the Ferrari, or the AlphaTauri. I'd say the Aston Martin at the moment is about the sixth best car overall. I'd say aerodynamically, I'd say they're probably equal of Alfa Romeo, if not Alfa Romeo slightly ahead of them. But Aston Martin, they're not as anywhere near as bad as Alpine. We'll get onto them in a moment. Alpine are looking really bad for the season, and at least Aston Martin did get a point. But there was one incident in the Grand Prix that sparked flashbacks, and it was Sebastian Vettel having another collision with someone, which he's had plenty in the last couple of years. And this incident was so poor from Vettel. So Ocon, he's on fresher tyres, going around the outside. Ocon he's through. I think even Sebastian Vettel at this point knows Ocon is through. There's nothing Sebastian can do about it, except maybe try and get DRS on him on the exit of turn 2 and 3 and get a run on him to turn 4. That's the only thing he can do. But then, stupidly, and it was very stupid, pulls right back into the slipstream to the point where he will lose a lot of front downforce because he's right behind Ocon's car, and then does what he did to Max Verstappen at Silverstone in 2019, locks up and just piles into the back of him, and then, of course, spins Ocon out. Very poor in, driving from Sebastian Vettel. Deserved the penalty points he got. Very, very poor. I mean, he's had a problematic, to say the least, weekend. The last thing he needed to do was to go and punt someone off the track. At least it didn't mean anything, though, because they were racing, I think, for 13th and 14th place, but still so poor from Sebastian. And then raced on for the rest of the Grand Prix with a broken front wing, I believe. So yeah, very poor from him, but at least Aston Martin got a point because they didn't really deserve a point. Because, again, the pace of their car, not that good at the minute. But talking of Alpine, let's get on to them. So, yeah, Alpine, they are, I'm just going to say it, they're shit. They are absolute shit. This car has no strong points at all. Aerodynamically, it's mediocre at best. Renault have probably the least power, and you could see that in the race. I mean, anyone who got within a second of an Alpine, you were either right behind that car by the end of the straight or easily overtaking them. I mean, Kimi Raikkonen with a power unit that's not that much better, the Ferrari, than the Renault, got DRS past Alonso and, retook the racing line even down into turn one at one point. So, again, this car, really poor, and I don't see Alpine at all finishing in the top 5 in the Constructors' Championship this season. I know it's only one race gone, but there are certain cars where you just see and you think, yeah, that's not a good car. They're not going to finish anywhere near this certain position where they want to be. Alpine will not be in the top 5 in the Constructors. I can guarantee you that because, again, there is no strong points in this car. Any good results will come down to the drivers. Yeah, they're not in for a good season at all. I'm honestly, considering where the car is pace-wise, which I would say it's probably the 8th best car on the grid, even behind Alfa Romeo, I'm not sure where they score points this season. I'm not saying they won't score points. They will, because there'll be a race where Alonso, gets into the top 10 because of chaos plus, him being so great. I'm sure Ocon will get some points as well. But, when we come to certain Grand Prix tracks and you think, yeah, this track is a track where I can see this team doing this. Even, with Alfa Romeo, I think Alfa Romeo, say with Kimi Raikkonen, I could see them scoring points in Portimao because their car is kind of suited for this year to that kind of track. And Kimi there was pretty good last year, so I can see that happening. I mean, they almost scored points yesterday. They're only 2 seconds away from Lance Stroll at the end, so almost got a point yesterday. With Alpine, I just don't see... I can't think of a Grand Prix like, yeah, that'd be a track where they do well. Can't think of one, because again, the grip's poor, the power's poor in comparison to the rest. Overall, really poor. I mean, Ocon only just beat George Russell in the Williams. So, if that doesn't say it all, I don't know what does. And this man on screen, I'm sure, is preparing to grenade another team with his comments on team radio very, very shortly. Because again, that car, it's really bad. Really, really bad. I don't see where they score points this season. They will, because of luck and some good driving in there as well. But on pure pace, I don't see where points finishes come for this team. Going to be very similar to, say, an Alfa Romeo or a Haas from the last year or so. Very hard to see that happening. We'll finish the final couple teams. Alfa Romeo, as I said a minute ago, I thought they were unlucky not to get a point. Again, Kimi Raikkonen, P11, only a couple seconds behind Stroll in the fight for points. So, yeah, unlucky. I think Raikkonen, maybe, if he didn't have, say compared to his teammate, such a poor qualifying, being half a second off and down in P14, that probably would have helped if he was going to get a points finish. So he'll have to work on his qualifying performances. I think at Imola, Raikkonen will be if the Alfa Romeo continues being the type of car it is, I can see Raikkonen getting in the top 12 in qualifying at Imola. But yeah, I think Alfa Romeo should still be very happy with their performance because the car is a massive improvement on last year aerodynamically. They've got a bit more power now, as was clearly showed in the Grand Prix. And Alfa Romeo this season will score points. There is no doubt about it. There will be races where they'll get points. It won't be massive points. It'll be 1-2 points here and there at probably, 6 or 7 Grand Prix this season at least. But they'll definitely get some points finishes. Again, they were unlucky to do so yesterday. And then the final 2 teams, you got Williams. I thought Russell drove very well. Again, 14th, almost got 13th off of Ocon. He wasn't actually miles away from Lance Stroll in P10, so very good drive from Russell. The Williams is a massive improvement on last year, which is good to see. And yeah, I think Williams, I don't know where they'll be quite aerodynamically speaking, because I don't think we've quite seen what that car has to offer on that, again, in that aspect, because Bahrain is a power track that we'll see in Imola. But Russell looking very good there. And then I think this picture not only sums up Nikita Mazepin's last few months, but also sums up Haas's season so far. And I think this picture will sum up their season overall. Mazepin, that's all I can say to that. But let me just quickly come to you guys in the chat to see what you guys have to say about the midfield. And all the teams I just talked about, which is what? AlphaTauri, Aston, Alpine, Alfa Romeo, Williams, and Haas. I think, yeah, this is a good... I think actually this is a very good comment from Francisco, who says, Alpine has a strong point though, Chazza. They have Alonso. True. That is their get out of jail card, because if they didn't have him, and let's say they had Ocon and Hulkenberg in this car, I don't think they would score a point, because, again, it's really poor, that car. And a shame that they weren't even reliable with Fernando Alonso, but that reliability problem wasn't really a Renault problem. Basically, a sandwich bag, been confirmed, a sandwich bag got in Alonso's rear brake duct, and that's what caused his overheating and then eventually retirement. So it wasn't a Renault issue, but still added insult to injury, that did. Fantastico says Alpine are shocking. Francisco says Alfa Romeo has a lot of moments where Kimi's close to Giovinazzi, like half a second for several laps, and they never employ team orders. Yeah, there was in the Grand Prix yesterday where Perez was behind both of them, and I remember Raikkonen was within DRS. And yeah, they probably should have got Raikkonen ahead, but because Antonio out-qualified him by half a second, I can see why they would have been a bit like, let's give Antonio a chance here. But in hindsight, yeah, it probably did cost Raikkonen a points finish, because if Raikkonen had got past, he might have been able to close the gap a lot quicker to Alonso and Stroll and probably beat them just about by the end. So, yeah. But one solution for that would be, Raikkonen out-qualifying him, which is something he's finding very hard to do. The Iceman says Mazepin has more formation laps than race laps. Yes, you are right. Oh my. I think Mazepin, he's going to be that driver this season, kind of like, maybe not like Kubica, because at least Kubica had a reason for why he was the way he was in 2019, but he's going to be kind of like a Rio Haryanto or a Will Stevens type of driver this season, where he's just, toiling around at the back, having accidents all the time, because he's the type of guy who, when he gets it together, yeah, he's quick, but him getting it together is pretty hard because he's way too aggressive, I think, and he's still got that F2 young driver driving style, when in F1 you do need to adjust. Just ask Charles Leclerc, because I remember in the first 2 or 3 races he did for Sauber in 2018, he had quite poor races and then adjusted his style and then became the rookie of the year that year. So he does, I think Mazepin, the only thing I can really say in terms of a tip, I mean, I'm not a Formula 1 driver, of course, never have been, never will be, but I think he does need to adjust his style, because being massively aggressive and having that F2 driving style, that's not going to work in Formula 1. So, yeah, he's going to have to improve that. Another great comment. The Iceman, Mazepin is Maldonado without any speed. Yeah, bang on. You're absolutely bang on. Iceman says Giovinazzi had a 10-second pit stop as well. I didn't know that. Thank you for letting me know that. Right, let me find some other comments here, if I can, about these teams. Given the competitiveness of Aston Martin and Alpine, Vettel and Alonso will be racing all season. Also, Raikkonen, he'll be in there as well. Can't wait for more of those battles. Tsunoda overtook 3 Hall of Famers, says Seirugara. Yeah, he did. He did. It was a very good debut by Tsunoda. There's no doubt about that. Very good debut. Even though he qualified 13th, it wasn't really his fault. So, yeah, that was a very good drive. And I think as well, I saw earlier that he is the first Japanese driver in history to score points on his F1 debut. So, there you go. And we've had some pretty good ones in the past. Kobayashi, Takuma Sato. Who else? Was it Nakajima? Not just Kazuki, but I think it's Satoru Nakajima as well, who was teammates of Ayrton Senna in 1987. Suzuki, I think, as well, was another driver. So, I think, was it Ukyo Katayama was another Japanese driver as well. So, yeah. And, Becky Hybrid says, and pretty much sums it up, Haas is like Caterham in 2014. Haas, and the gaps in the race, I mean, I know Nib said in the race watch along, and I do believe him, that Haas won't have their proper car until Imola, so the pace should improve, but their pace in the Grand Prix was awful. I mean, Mick Schumacher, I think, was nearly a lap behind the Williams of Russell. He was so far behind everyone else. Not because of him, because of the car. The car is dog shit. It really is. I think Caterham, saying it's like Caterham is a compliment. I'd say more HRT. Because, yeah, this site right here for the Haas car was a very common one as well for the HRT. And also, similar livery. There you go. But anyway, to end off the stream, let's get into, and let me hide these graphics. Let's get into the championship standings. Of course, the driver standings will just be the finishing order of Bahrain, because we've only done one Grand Prix. But it is Lewis Hamilton leading by 7 points from Max Verstappen. Valtteri Bottas 2 points behind Verstappen. Then Norris in 4th. Perez 5th. Leclerc 6th. Ricciardo 7th. Carlos Sainz in 8th. Yuki Tsunoda 9th. Lance Stroll 10th. And then Raikkonen, Giovinazzi, Ocon, Russell, Vettel, Schumacher, Gasly, Latifi, Alonso, and Mazepin. And then your constructor standings, which I actually think are way more interesting for this season if we don't get a driver's title fight. And I think already they are quite interesting after just one Grand Prix. So Mercedes are, of course, in the lead on 41 points, 13 points clear from Red Bull. McLaren 3rd on 18 points. Ferrari 6 points behind in 4th. Then AlphaTauri 5th on just 2 points. Aston Martin 6th on 1 point. And then Alfa Romeo 7th. Alpine 8th, Williams 9th, and Haas in 10th. And already you can see that AlphaTauri and Aston Martin already have work to do, because they have already. I mean, AlphaTauri is 16 points behind McLaren, and Aston Martin are 17 points behind. So let's say Aston Martin, if they do start the season off a bit slow, they don't want to be giving McLaren a massive head start if they are to compete with them later on. So already the Constructors' Championship looking tasty, but also looks as though a couple teams do need to get on with it straight away at the next Grand Prix at Imola. So yeah, I hope we can see AlphaTauri, say, getting a strong points finish in I'm sorry, it was just breaking news on Sky Sports News. I've got that on. That's why I'm stuttering. Yeah, AlphaTauri, they really do need a result like McLaren got in the race yesterday in Bahrain, because if, let's say, AlphaTauri get another point or two and McLaren score 10 or 15, then again, that's them giving McLaren too much of a head start. So, as I said already, you can see that certain teams do need to get on with it. But, get this back up. There you go. Finishing order from yesterday. And, well, I think, guys, that's pretty much it for the stream. Let me just read some more comments from the chat. By the way, great that there are so many of you watching this. I did not expect to have almost 250 people watching live. So, thank you very much for that. And as well, don't forget to subscribe for more race weekend content for Formula 1. Because, of course, we will be doing this for every Grand Prix weekend in 2021. And there is 22 more races to go. The next one being Imola in 3 weeks' time. Also, make sure to stick around for a few more minutes, because I do need to update you guys as to the schedule going forward for content. So, yeah, make sure to stick around. And as well, as I've said, don't forget to smash the like button. Share this video everywhere you can. Subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Don't forget to join our Discord server. Link below in the description. And yeah. By the way, thank you, Ben Lewis and Finton. Thank you very much. Dan asks, did I miss you talking about Alfa Romeo? I did talk about Alfa Romeo briefly. If you want to rewind in the stream, then you can, or just wait for the stream to finish. I did go through them briefly. Let me read out one final comment, then we'll get to the end of the stream and get to my what the content is going to be for the next few weeks. NN says or asks, excellent review, but will there be guests in the future? You know what? That's an idea. Maybe there will be guests in the future. That would be nice to have. So I'll try and see what I can do about that. Because it would obviously make it more interesting for these race reviews. But I think, for this first one, considering I only decided to do, or, come up with the idea of doing this like 2 days ago, I didn't really have time to contact anyone. So, yeah, I think for the next time we do this, which will be the Monday after Imola in 3 weeks from now, definitely have a guest on. Right, I think it's time we get into the content schedule coming up. So, need to let you guys know, you'll probably be disappointed by this, but I think you'll understand. So, for the next 2.5 weeks, there will be no content on the channel. The reason is, and it's for a good reason, is because normally, and I know other F1 YouTubers will be doing this as well, they'll be making videos on certain teams and drivers and stuff like that in this break. But the reason I don't want to do that, and I'm not going to do that, is because it's only been one Grand Prix. So I don't want to make a video about, can Verstappen win the championship? Will there be a title fight? How will the title fight go? And stuff like that, because it's only been one race. We might get to the Spanish Grand Prix and Hamilton is 50 points clear. So I need to wait before I start making videos about that. And also when it comes to certain teams, again, I need to wait to see after 3 or 4 races who is where basically for the season. And that's, when I will start making recorded videos. So there won't be any content on the channel for another 2.5 weeks. But the Thursday before the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, I will be doing a live stream previewing the Grand Prix and catching you guys up on the news that's happened in the 2.5 weeks that is about to begin between now and that stream on Thursday, the 15th of April, I believe, is the Thursday before that Grand Prix weekend. So that is when the next video or stream will be. And then, of course, on the Saturday, I'll do 3 streams, practice 3 watch along, qualifying watch along, race preview, and then a race watch along on the Sunday, and then a race review on the Monday night as well. So that is the plan between now and the Monday after the Imola Grand Prix. Just want to say as well, for thank you guys so much for this weekend. So many viewers, so many new subs, so much great content. I thought me and Nib yesterday, quality-wise and commentary, were great, and I hope you guys really enjoyed that. I was covering the race for you and getting the band back together. It was great. And yeah, hopefully you will join us for the next 22 Grand Prix as well. But yeah, that's it for the stream, guys. Again, thank you very much. Don't forget to subscribe for that content coming up in 3 weeks' time. And for, again, 22 more races this season. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. Or go to my channel page and do it there. Smash the like button. Don't forget to share this video everywhere you can. Comment down below what you thought of everything I talked about. The teams, the drivers, the incidents, the Mercedes, Red Bull, or the Hamilton Verstappen battle. Let me know in the comments what you thought about that. And as well, again, don't forget to join my Discord server. Link below in the description. We have just over 450 people in that server, and it is pretty active at all times, basically. So if you want to talk F1 with other people, then go and join that server. And also we have an email address down below, which is my email. If you want to send me an email for any reason, then there you go. But guys, until the next video, which will be, again, 2.5 weeks from now, probably 7 p.m. on the 15th of April, Thursday the 15th of April, for a preview for the 2021 Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix and a catch-up on the news that's happened in the 2.5 week break between the two Grand Prix. Until then, until that live stream, and until then, it has been me, Sakhir HD. Goodbye.